Many of you know our first speaker, Lennart Koopmann, founder and CTO of Greylog. In fact, many of you may have had the chance to connect with him last week at Greylog Go. Lennart is here to speak to us today about how OpenSearch components can be used to successfully detect anomalies for critical cybersecurity challenges. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Lennart.
Awesome to be here. I'm Lennart. The first time in Seattle. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone who was involved in organizing this event. It has been absolutely fantastic, the preparation. One of my best events already, so great job everyone on the OpenSearch side. We're going to be talking today about the art of the possible. I think this is a very interesting title. What it's really about in detail is how we as Greylog, as the product, as the company, are leveraging open source anomaly detection to offer UEBA to our customers. And there will be a slide that explains what UEBA is. I feel like I had a real speaker kind of morning this morning. Woke up and there's smoke outside and it smells like burnt plastic in the hotel. So I was up really quickly this morning being convinced that this hotel is on fire. Arriving here and my laptop breaks. So I have now my backup laptop, but it's still working. This is awesome. I'm Lennart. I am the CTO and the founder over at Greylog. I always love to ask, who of you has heard about Greylog before you saw the title or came to the conference here? Who has seen Greylog used? It's a lot of hands. This is awesome. So I started Greylog, the open source project, back in 2009. Every time I see this number, it's a little scary because now it's 2022, and I feel like it's really still March 2020 if we think about it. But it's been many, many years now. I was a very junior developer, and I started the project because I was working at a tiny company. We got an offer or quote from a company called Splunk that was, I think, for more money than we had on the bank account that day. And so being a very junior developer, I said I was going to build this myself. Can't be that hard. Turns out it's pretty hard. And we're all still busy doing that. Started a company behind Greylog in 2013. That was over in beautiful Hamburg, Germany. So I feel like we're having someone from Germany or living in Germany on stage all the time today. I met two gentlemen yesterday at the happy hour. They're from Germany, but I started it over there. That is because I am from there. I lived 26, 27 years over there, born and raised, and moved the company, however, to the United States in 2015. That's when we opened the US operation side of all of this. We are still very present over in Germany. We're hiring developers over there, and we keep on growing the company over there as well. But we have about, this is a guess now, I think about 125 people working in the company today. And I personally live in beautiful Houston, Texas. So just really quick for the history of Greylog. I've seen a lot of hands go up when I asked who has heard about Greylog or even used Greylog in the past. It started as a log management software used among developers. I was a junior developer back then. I've built it for use cases where you have an application running, that application generates a bunch of logs, and you need to centralize them somewhere, right? That's what the first use cases were. Most of the people I knew who I worked with, who I knew were working at other companies, kind of my professional peers, they were all software developers. The first use cases were all centered around that because honestly, I had no clue about IT operations or security. So of course it started for the first years. You would send your PHP logs into it. You would send your Ruby on Rails logs in it. That happened to be because I was a Ruby on Rails developer back then and I had PHP experience, right? These small open source projects, sometimes if you build them because you want to use them yourself, are often very narrow in their use cases that they're designed for in the beginning. But what happened is that over time, more and more people who started to use it for IT operations. It was on GitHub. I went to all the local user groups. That's when I said I did a lot of these talks. I just fired up Greylog on a projector and I would just show it and be like, yeah, you can download it. Go start using it and tell me how you like it or if you don't like it or what's missing. And more people who used it for IT operations started to pop up. And I think their use cases were around, well, we're going to send it the logs from our routers, from our firewalls, operating systems, kind of going one or two levels deeper on the stack. It was interesting to see that developers and IT ops people started to use it together. And that was in, I want to say 2010, 2011. That is when a bunch of people in Belgium also started to meet and started to come up with this idea of DevOps, which then rapidly started to become more and more popular. That felt very, very familiar. So Greylog started to also become very popular in these use cases. So now, many, many years fast forward, suddenly it's 2016, and we're launching Greylog Enterprise. Classic open core model. We launched it with a bunch of features, and that helped kind of for the company to really grow and kind of build some really financial kind of solid feet, and bring us to this path that we're on today. Interesting, though, was that while we did that, we got a call from a company, and they said, hey, we're using Greylog all day long. We know we're not a customer. We found your phone number online. We are using it for security, and the system is down, and we need help because we're also in the middle of an incident response, and we need our logs. What do we do, right? And so Sam, who's also here, you might see him later, he was on the phone. He walks over to my desk and says, Lennart, this is company so-and-so, I'm not going to say who it was. They're using it for security, and they're stuck, their cluster is down. And my response was, what are they doing with this thing for security, right? So I had, at that point, I didn't really know what, besides some simple use cases, how people were using Greylog for security use cases. So got deeper into that, and it turns out, yeah, Greylog is a really good fit for that. And so today, information security is our fastest growing use case. And it's, of course, also very important for compliance, right? I think no matter which product you use, if you collect your logs, often you want to store them for a very long time, either because you simply need to do that for compliance. I hope also because you really look at these logs from time to time, and kind of being compliant is a side effect of also doing your log management right. And now, while we're here today, we have switched from Elasticsearch to OpenSearch earlier this year. So in the very, very first iterations, I don't know if there's someone here who's used Greylog back then. In the very, very first, actually in the very first prototype, it used MySQL because that was what was there when I built the first prototype. After that, for a few years, Greylog actually used MongoDB as its main storage. Worked pretty well. At some point, though, the use cases got larger and larger and larger, and we switched it over to Elasticsearch. It was a very, very early version of Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch didn't even have a company behind it, and I think it was one of their first websites, which they then rapidly cycled through to get to the one that they're in today. And so Elasticsearch has historically been what we've been built on. And we have switched to OpenSearch earlier this year with our release that came out. We said, hey, we're going to keep on supporting the current versions of Elasticsearch that we're supporting because we don't want to force our users to just with one release switch everything at once. But we said, hey, if you are building something new, if you are having the resources, if you're having the confidence, then please start to switch over to OpenSearch already, because that's going to be our way going forward. Our 5.0 release is going to come out at the end of November of this year. This is where we're deprecating and removing actually an already deprecated version of Elasticsearch. So it will only support, I think it's 7.10 series or so of Elasticsearch, and OpenSearch 2.x. So we're cycling out Elasticsearch with major release after major release. I believe, and I hope I'm not leaning too far out of the window, 6.0, which is our next major release, will then basically cut off Elasticsearch entirely. And if you want to run Greylog, you're going to run it with OpenSearch. Because we're talking today about Greylog security, which is the Greylog module, and the UEBA and the anomaly detection part of it. If you want to run that you can today only run with OpenSearch. Because we're using OpenSearch functionality, if you want to use that part of Greylog, you have to run Greylog together with OpenSearch. And this is why we have a lot of, I think, very good material online on how to perform a migration from a Elasticsearch cluster to an OpenSearch cluster. Because that's, of course, for our customers, for our users, that's an interesting challenge, right? You might have a cluster sitting out there with hundreds of terabytes of data, and now we come around the corner and tell, yeah, just switch out this whole system. So it's going to be easy. It's not going to be a problem, right? We have a lot of material around that. Very glad that we had a lot of technical writers, our professional services people, our engineers. They all came together and they wrote a very comprehensive guide, I think, on how to switch from Elasticsearch to OpenSearch, because that's what our users will have to do over the next coming months, right? All right, the Greylog architecture. Pretty simple in the end, I believe. So you have the Greylog server sitting in the middle. This is the component that we write. Written in Java, and that is basically the component you send your logs into, performs the processing, and then writes all of that into OpenSearch. We are also still requiring a MongoDB, but that almost takes no data, no log data is going into that. We're using that for some state. We're using that as a little bit of an improvised message bus for some cluster communication, and we're using it to store the configuration that you put in Greylog as well. We're doing that because we think that Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, really any full-text search engine is not a great place to store that. We want to use that for the log data. Also has the nice side effect that if you perform any sort of maintenance on your OpenSearch cluster, you can still use Greylog because Greylog uses all the configuration, everything reads that out of MongoDB, which means that, yeah, you can't search and Greylog's going to buffer on disk until it can write again, but you can still use the Greylog web interface to its full extent, even if there's no OpenSearch currently running behind it. So Greylog has been designed like this from the beginning. The browser and the client, Greylog spins up a web interface. So if you use Greylog and you run it with OpenSearch, you can, of course, use the OpenSearch dashboards, and you use Greylog as kind of an ingestion engine. We're going to look at that in a second. Greylog does, however, spin up its entire web interface. So you can use OpenSearch as the full-text search engine, and then Greylog for all the analysis, for the configuration, for the parsing, forwarding to other systems, forwarding into Greylog Cloud, writing archives, running reports, setting up alerts, correlation engine. All of that is sitting in Greylog. Greylog spins up a REST API. That was actually my talk at Greylog Go, was about the Greylog REST API. So you can also connect to that and automate a lot of things in Greylog, pull out data out of Greylog, but it comes with its own web interface. We're going to see that in the demo also in just a second. We have built our own web interface because I think that OpenSearch is a fantastic full-text search engine. You can get fantastic value out of it for your log management use cases. Greylog kind of puts one layer on top of that, where because I think I found this very interesting. I think it was Eli who said in the keynote that OpenSearch takes an unopinionated approach at the data that's in it. We take a very opinionated approach on it. We put that layer on top of it. We do that because we know you're going to send it log data. We have the context of it. We might know which asset it came from, right? So we can make certain decisions for you so that your management overhead is less. So for example, you tell Greylog, I want to keep firewall logs for 2 weeks and then archive them. That's the configuration you do. It's one level ahead of, okay, I'm going to have this index model. This is how I'm going to do the retention. This is what I'm going to do when it cycles out. Greylog kind of takes this opinionated approach and can ask you the right questions, basically. This makes Greylog together with OpenSearch a super powerful combination. Now this, I'm not going to look at all these boxes because it's basically the same thing. This is a more complicated setup. This is a larger kind of a production setup of Greylog. It's the same steps. It's you send your log messages into a load balancer. The load balancer sends them into your Greylog server nodes. The Greylog server nodes connect to a MongoDB, and then everything's being written into OpenSearch. What I'm trying to show with that is you can scale this just like you can scale OpenSearch to huge amounts of data. You can also scale Greylog to huge amounts of ingest. We scale linearly. We as a product kind of grew up in a world where, yeah, you want to spin up a lot of small boxes instead of one huge box. This has been in Greylog like this really from the beginning. It's designed to be spun up and down very easily. So for example, we have users in the e-commerce space. They like OpenSearch and Greylog because you can, before Thanksgiving, for example, you just spin everything up like crazy, and then Thanksgiving is over, and you spin it all down again. And you do that without data loss. You do that without a lot of maintenance headache around it. This is what Greylog has been designed to do. All right, so now to the actual topic of this talk. UEBA. What is UEBA? It stands for User and Entity Behavior Analytics. And you'll see I have to read this from the slide because I myself often forget what this is. What this really means is, and now if there's analysts in the room, please forgive me and do not quote me, but what I would say UEBA really is anomaly detection on any sort of log data. The entity, a user and entity in this context means it's data from users or data from servers or machines, which tells me okay, that's from everything, right? I mean, what else is there really? There's machines and there's people. So it's looking at behavior, and it tries to find outliers, and it tries to find anomalies in that behavior. So for example, let's say a user never really logs in after midnight, but just did so. okay? You don't want to have a simple alarm sitting there, which you could model in Greylog if you wanted to, that says if it's after midnight local time of the user, this is getting a little complicated already. See, like where, in which time zone is it midnight, right? What time zone is that user in right now? So if you say, let's say you standardize it all to UTC and you say, okay, if after midnight of where we assume this user is, if there's ever a login happening, trigger an alert, send it to the security operations center. You can do that until this person travels, and suddenly that person logs in at midnight in Europe, which is not midnight in North America, and you trigger a useless ticket, right? Another thing, a user usually logs in successfully and needs maybe, I personally usually need like 2 attempts because of our password policy. I might fat finger this a little. Let's say suddenly I'm trying to log into this laptop, not this one, the one that broke, which is monitored. I try to log into that laptop and it takes me 7 attempts because I'm tired, it's an early meeting and I have caps lock on and I don't notice it, right? Do you want to set a hard limit on 5 attempts? Like, do you want to set like this threshold, or do you want to do real anomaly detection that says, yeah, no, usually I need 1 or 2 attempts and suddenly I need 7. This is maybe something, this is not a high severity alert, but this might be something where we want to look into. We don't need to isolate this laptop, we need to shut down this laptop automatically, but we will probably want to look into what's going on here. And then the third example is, let's say you have a device that never communicated with a specific other device in your network. So this is now looking at the entity part and not at the user part. And those 2 devices have never communicated. Now they're suddenly exchanging a lot of data. That's a little odd. Or you have this laptop and it has usually making this up, 25 DNS requests per minute. And suddenly it's making 1,000 DNS requests per minute. They're going to really weird looking, or they're requesting really weird looking domain names, and they're maxing out the entire size that you can put into a UDP packet. That could be a DNS tunnel. That's interesting, right? That's something you might want to look into. That's the kind of behavior that you're analyzing here and that you want to find anomalies in. The way Greylog does data ingestion, because this is now how this plays together with OpenSearch, is that you send a message into what's called a Greylog input. You tell Greylog, spin up let's say, a syslog input on TCP on this port and this IP address. Greylog is going to do that, and you can point all your syslog sources at that. Greylog is then applying a parser based on the format that you told Greylog would come in there. You can always say, I don't know what's going to come in. You make it plain text and apply your own parsing. But if you tell it there's going to be syslog in it, Greylog is going to go and Greylog is going to try to parse that syslog for you. Okay. Greylog has a whole plugin system, so you can also go and write your own if you want to. But after that step, you apply your own custom parsing. This happens in pipelines. We can take a quick look at that in just a second as well. And you use these pipelines to do further enrichment, filtering, parsing, extraction. So, for example, you're running in AWS. You are getting the AWS flow logs, which are basically your network connection logs. And they're very low level. It's ports, IP addresses, bytes exchanged in which direction, usually. It's very much like NetFlow. And you could use a Greylog pipeline to say, okay, parse out the source IP address, the destination IP address, take that source IP address, and run it against a lookup table that is filled by your EC2 API so we can enrich the log message that came in with some things like this was the instance name, this is the instance type, this is the region it ran in, and here are all the tags someone put on that EC2 instance. That's stuff that you can do with processing pipelines. And then after processing, Greylog writes it to any output you configured by default, and always it will write to OpenSearch. It can write to Greylog Cloud. It can write really wherever you want to. It has, like I said, there's a whole plugin system sitting behind that, and the Greylog community is writing a lot of these plugins. So you can use Greylog kind of also sitting in the middle, where you say everything always goes into OpenSearch, into Greylog Cloud, but it also goes into Google BigQuery, for example. And then you can do further analytics in that one. That's something that you can do with Greylog. So now, OpenSearch anomaly detection, right? Remember the previous slide? I should have probably sorted them a little differently. The previous slide, which talked about these anomalies that you want to detect. So now, we at Greylog, we want to enable our users to do that, right? So we're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, how do we implement anomaly detection against all that data, right? And OpenSearch comes around the corner, and we know that, hey, OpenSearch has anomaly detection built in. We should give that a try. And it turns out it works really, really, really well. So if you use our UEBA features, they are in fact for anomaly detection. They're entirely using OpenSearch functionality. We're basically configuring OpenSearch for you. Again, this is this extra layer that we're putting on top where you don't have to build this yourself and figure out the APIs and all of that. No, you simply tell us, I want anomaly detection in firewall logs, Windows authentication logs, my Okta logs, my Office 365 logs. And then we take our opinion and we pre-configure it for you so you can go and you can get the best out of that data. Greylog creates anomaly detectors for you automatically. We build these and we configure them in OpenSearch for you. We simply use the OpenSearch API calls for that. We use basically our processing pipelines and automatic configuration to set this all up for you, which means we're not hiding any of this. This is still just an OpenSearch. You can pull this back out using the OpenSearch APIs. You can change the configuration even if you wanted to. But what we do then is this starts to run now in OpenSearch. This runs in your OpenSearch cluster, and we simply regularly pull the APIs, and we pull the events out of that, and then we write that back into our event system. You can run against the OpenSearch APIs yourself if you want to integrate deeper with that. But Greylog basically triggers the things that the OpenSearch anomaly detection finds, pulls that out, puts it into the Greylog event system, which means you can use this now in dashboards, you can use this in reports, you can use this for further alerting. You can say, if a anomaly detection alert comes in, you can go and you can say, okay, do something with that, right? Further enrich that one. Maybe it's about a domain, take the domain field, run a whois lookup against it. So you can get really, really flexible on what you want to do with this stuff. And that, of course, also means Greylog takes care of the actual alerting and the triggers. So you can say send a Slack message, send an email, perform any action. If you have another acronym, SOAR, Security, Orchestration, and Automation and Response, then you can go and you can take automatic actions, right? You can go and say, yeah, if that happens, then isolate this port, shut down this machine, kick off a whole incident response playbook if you want to. You can do these things because, again, Greylog sits there now and it's a level on top of that. You can do cool stuff with that. This is the Greylog web interface that I talked about. So this is the additional interface you get on top of it. Just so you get a quick idea of it, this is, for example, our index configuration here. So we're putting a lot of stuff on top, right? And this is what, if you download Greylog today, you're going to get all of this, right? This is the Greylog open source you're looking at here. This is our, I'm not sure if we have any inputs configured here on this one. We do not. But this is what Greylog looks like. This is kind of the query interface here. It should load momentarily. Here we go. So if you have used log management before, this is probably going to look very familiar. But you can try this out yourself in the Greylog open source version. Now, something that you get as a paid customer is this security tab, which gives you all sorts of extra analytics. And I think what I just wanted to show you real quick today, and we're not going to go into too much detail here, but I click on the anomalies tab. Here we go. And we have some anomalies that have been triggered and detected against some test data that we have in this cluster. So you see here, we have found 33 anomalies. One of them was a high-grade anomaly, 12 users with anomalies. 2 detectors are currently running. I believe in this one, we are looking at Cisco ASA unusual data transfer. Cisco ASA logs is what we're looking at, and we're also looking at Windows security event logs. And we found anomalies here, and this is because this is a demo that we're feeding with some things that actually trigger these things. We have unusual data transfer, and we have failed authentication. So if I wanted to jump in and I want to see what is this high-grade anomaly that has been detected, I can click on this replay button, and that is basically going to execute the search right here that this alert was based on. You see we found one anomaly. It was unusual data transfer. It has an anomaly score of 0.92. And it gives us all of this extra information here, where this came from. You see here, in fact, we do run in a Greylog processing pipeline. If an alert comes in that has a source IP, we run a whois against it, because an analyst might be interested in that in this moment, which, of course, because this is a RFC 1918, whatever that RFC is for internal IP addresses, you'll see that, yeah, this is not a publicly routable IP address, so this is a private IP address. As you can see here, it's a reserved IP, true. So now I could build my own dashboard out of this, for example. I could set another alert on it. I could, whenever this comes in, send an email, create a ticket, send something to PagerDuty. This is where Greylog comes in and adds this additional layer of value on top of the really cool stuff that the OpenSearch project has built. And I think that's what I wanted to show today. I'm going to be around all day. If you have questions about Greylog or how beautiful the city of Hamburg is, I will be very happy to explain this all day. But I love Seattle too. And thanks for listening. That was awesome.